Good evening, everyone. Let's cultivate our motivation. So it's really incredible that we have an interest in the Dharma. This is really precious. So many people can bump into the teachings of the Buddha. They might live down the street from the Dharma center or the temple. But in this lifetime, they may never, ever be interested for a moment in finding out what it's about. Or sometimes people do pursue the interest, and after a certain period of time, the interest wanes, and they're no longer interested in hearing the teachings. So this is something that we have to cherish and cultivate. And I'm quite sure that when we're all, if we have the opportunity to be aware when we're dying, so let's just fast forward right now to whenever it is that we're going to leave the planet, I'm quite sure that this will give us a sense of peace when we reflect back on the fact that we took this opportunity, we practiced, we've met the Dharma, we've met a teacher, like Venerable Children and any other teachers that we have who are teaching pure Dharma. And we did what we could in the time we had. So we have this opportunity tonight to hear the teachings on joyous perseverance, joyous effort. And may these teachings really help us progress in the path so that eventually we'll be able to benefit all beings. So Venerable Children, as far as we know, is somewhere in India right now. Maybe she's in Bodh Gaya underneath the Bodhi tree. And I wrote a little note to her and I said, by the way, when you're there, just go for it. Get enlightened. But please come back to the Abbey. So she will be returning next week. But she will be too tired to teach next week, so we'll have Venerable Tarpa teaching on the last two perfections. So you'll see Venerable Children 2 weeks from now. Tonight's talk, as I just mentioned, is on joyous effort, and my sources are Venerable Children's teachings, of course, and Geshe Sopa's commentary on the Lam Rim, and Lama Tsongkhapa's Lam Rim Chenmo. So I think what I'll do is I'll stick pretty close to my script tonight, because with an hour I could go off on tangents and you might hear everything else but joyous effort. You might hear horse stories, but it wouldn't be very beneficial. So I think I'm going to really keep looking down a lot. And there's a lot of fantastic material here to hear. So what is it, this joyous effort? You might think, how could this be a perfection? And that is actually where the problem starts. If we think, yeah, joyous effort, I know what that is. I'm happy to do it or I'm not. And if that's all we know about it, like me, until recently, that's going to create huge obstacles to us knowing what it is. So Geshe Sopa refers to this as perseverance. And he says, before we begin a practice, we have to want to do it. This desire comes from knowing the nature of the practice and the benefits of doing it. The nature of joyous activity is joy in doing a virtuous activity. Joy does not arise on its own. It needs an object. So there's obviously ordinary joy, and we all have experienced that, and we've seen people go after things with a huge amount of effort, and people have sacrificed their lives and experienced hardship and financial burden and huge obstacles just to do things like mountain climbing and surfing and building a house. Or there's one woman I read about, she's a long distance swimmer, And she can swim in water for a long period of time that's so cold it would kill all of us in the room. And people do this just out of a determination to do something in this lifetime. And it brings them joy, obviously, because people wouldn't do the things they do if it was just bringing misery. And then there's spiritual joy. And we've all in this room tasted this as well. So we've all, the first example that comes to mind is making plans to come and retreat, which is a very, very virtuous activity. And we've got Susan in the room right now and Isaac. And they're here early for the winter retreat. And they've made huge changes in their life just to come here. And I'm sure that there was vast amounts of planning for weeks and weeks. And you have to make sure that your home is taken care of, and your boss will let you come back if you have a job, and you've got to make sure that your pets are taken care of and your kids. And you've got to have saved up money to come. And what have I missed out in getting here? Preparing, what's that? Paying the bills.
Letting go of your cell phone.
Oh, letting go of the cell phone, right. So this kind of activity is very joyful, and this is spiritual joy. And then at the end of the retreat, we've all had the experience, usually, that our mind has really changed, and we are very joyful, and we've created a lot of merit. So this is the kind of joyous effort we're going to be talking about tonight. Now, we do know, I think we all know, that if we force ourselves to do something, we're going to have the should mind. And I think we've all had the should mind on the cushion. I know that I have. I should go and meditate. Or I should go because everyone else is there. And actually that brings really low quality results. And our effort is really minimal. And so I think we're probably not creating a lot of virtue, and we're just getting a cranky mind. So that's something that we have to watch out for, this should mind. If we're joyful, obviously we can maintain our determination and deal with problems as they arise. Joy makes any practice easy to do, continuously and vigorously. And that's what we're after. This thing that's going to continue to feed us just right through until enlightenment. Now, I've got a paper problem here. Okay. Shantideva says, what is perseverance? It's delight in virtue. That really sums it up. So throughout the talk tonight, I'm going to be showing you little pictures or big pictures of people who exemplify, in my opinion, joyous effort. Because quite often I think we think, you know, the Buddha had joyous effort, obviously, but who do we know who has this? Who can I look to as an example? Well, the first person, of course, who comes to mind is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So now I'm going to ask John to do some fancy camera work. And we're going to zoom in on His Holiness while I tell you some of my thoughts about his joyous efforts. Whenever His Holiness teaches, he quite often starts a talk by reiterating his 3 commitments. And they are, he promotes human values such as compassion, forgiveness, tolerance, contentment, and self-discipline. He remains committed to talk about the importance of these human values with everyone he meets. And his second commitment is to promote religious harmony and understanding among the world's major religions. And his third commitment is to act as the spokesperson of the Tibetans in their struggle for justice. And then, of course, this next quote from Shantideva, we will only always ever think of His Holiness when we hear this and read it. For as long as space endures, and as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. That inspires me. And you can also tell from the faces of people who have joyous effort that that's certainly the fuel that's running their life. Thank you very much. So now there's going to be a little test. So, what do you think is the most significant obstacle to joyous effort? Laziness. Now, this is a tough word to hear. You know, I think all of us, until we've done some reading about what laziness is in the spiritual sense, would absolutely not define ourselves. We would think that this is not possible in my life. I'm not lazy. And if you tell me I'm lazy, you've just insulted me in a huge way. And so, please leave. But it's actually the opposite of joyous effort. And it's the mental energy. Well, so joyous effort is the opposite to laziness. And this joyous effort is the mental energy that we need just to counteract all of this stuff that comes up as laziness. So we'll be hearing about this obstacle of laziness a little bit later. So how to begin now to cultivate this joyous effort? Well, first of all, we need to become interested in the practice. We do things only if we see that there are advantages, and if there are things that, well, then we don't do things that have disadvantages. So a perfect example of this is, I'm going to be comparing ordinary joy tonight to spiritual joy, because I think a lot of the times I think that spiritual joy, this path to enlightenment, should actually be easier than ordinary joy. And this is a wacky way of thinking. So if we think of exercise, for example, well, we all know the benefits of exercise. It actually makes our body stronger. When we actually do exercise daily, it makes our mind brighter, we're less sluggish, we're probably easier to get along with. In some cases, our body looks better when we do a lot of exercise. It can extend our lifespan. They found that people who don't exercise actually don't live as long. And so whenever we choose to do something, we're always making decisions. We're weighing, you know, why should I do it? So those are the reasons that we exercise. And then the disadvantages, well, we have to look at this. So, you know, sedentary lifestyle brings on all kinds of diseases and terminal conditions. It makes us feel bad, as I mentioned. We're dull, and we just, we waste a lot of time. So usually when we look at things like this, we think, okay, so those are the advantages, those are the disadvantages, I'm going to exercise. And we do it for a period of time until we get distracted. So there's many advantages, obviously, to cultivating joyous effort. And the first advantage is knowing this: obtaining anything of value is the result of perseverance. Maitreya says in the ornament for the Mahayana Sutra that perseverance is supreme among virtues because you obtain results by relying upon it. Then he goes on to say, perseverance brings immediate temporal happiness, supramundane, and worldly spiritual attainments. So that's another convincing reason. I don't know about you, but throughout my day, I'm constantly looking for happiness. Constantly. I'm looking in the wrong places usually. But if perseverance is going to bring me happiness, this is going to turn my mind towards it. Perseverance leads us to have pure conduct. Perseverance frees us from the view to the perishable aggregates. Perseverance perfects supreme qualities and purifies all obstacles. Perseverance in avoiding the 10 non-virtuous actions is the cause for a happy and long life, free from the lower realms, as well as worldly and supramundane attainments. So those are pretty convincing reasons, I think. Then another part of the ornament for Mahayana Sutras, Maitreya goes on to say, if you have perseverance, wealth cannot overcome you. I haven't had this big problem in my life, but some people do. And as we know, if you have a lot of wealth, or even a reasonable amount of wealth, we can spend a lot of time planning how to spend our money, spending the money, and socializing, and doing all the things that we need to do, like buying clothes and things to impress our friends as we're socializing. So obviously, having money, if we're not so mindful, can be a big obstacle. Then in the second line, Maitreya says, if you have perseverance, the mental afflictions cannot defeat you. So this is our weapon against our internal enemy, to have perseverance. Then he goes on to say, if you have perseverance, discouragement will not overcome you. So this is something that comes up quite often for me. I'll think, well, there it is. I blew it again with that person. I wasn't able to help them. I can't help anybody. I'm hopeless. I can't do the path, and all that kind of thinking. And he says that this kind of thinking leads to discouragement, which can cause one to lose one's bodhicitta. And when I read that, the small amount of hair that I have in my head stood up, and I thought, whoa. So we have to watch out for that one. In the fourth line of this sutra, it says, if you have perseverance, attainments will not defeat you. When I first saw that, I thought, well, what does that mean? And what this means is there's a danger that we can become conceited and relax when we've gotten a little bit along the way on the path. And so we think, well, I've sort of cleaned up my act a bit. That's good enough. And then we stop striving for this joyous effort, and we stop striving for the goal. Then the Compendium of Perfection says, if you have great perseverance, completely free from discouragement, there is nothing you can't accomplish or attain. And then, this is a great line, if you have perseverance conjoined with patience, humans and non-humans are happy to help you. I like that kind of help. Humans and non-humans. So, now that we have this beginning idea that perseverance is worth cultivating, the next thing that we learn about is that there's three kinds of perseverance. And the first one is called armor-like. And this is the there's three kinds of virtue, I should say, first. So the first one is armor-like, the next one is perseverance of gathering virtue, and the third one is perseverance of acting for the welfare of all living beings. So first of all, armor-like. This is the mind that is strong and vibrant. This is the mind that is nothing can penetrate it. And by nothing I mean negative afflictions can't penetrate it. We're not going to ever lose our resolve to work for the benefit of sentient beings, no matter what. Bodhisattvas don't engage in this kind of thing for themselves alone. They do this for all sentient beings. Now, I'm going to go back to comparing some things. So, joyous effort obviously is not just a religious activity. It's something that takes place for people in all aspects of life. So we see this in people who are striving for expertise and, becoming perfectionists in a certain discipline. We see it in people who are musicians and artists and very highly talented labor people, like the people who poured the cement today. They did a fabulous job. It looks fantastic. They're very highly skilled. We see this in scholars, in surgeons, in mountain climbers, in Olympic athletes. We see this everywhere. And I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm very curious about this research done by a fellow by the name of Anders Ericsson. And he's written a lot about this 10,000 hour rule. And the 10,000 hour rule is that you have to have engaged in 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at something. So I'm going to go on with this for a minute, and I'm going to then share why I get a little bit out of whack with why I think the spiritual path should be easy and Buddhahood, and yet, anyway, so I'll go on. So his theory is that people who truly reach high levels of anything have engaged in very serious practice over a very long time with a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice. And so he cites people like the Beatles, for example. And when the Beatles first were cutting their teeth as performers. They spent a long time in Hamburg, Germany, and from the years of 1960 to 64, they performed more than 1,200 concerts, more than 10,000 hours of performing. They're one of the few musical groups, apparently, according to his research, that have done this. And then he cites Bill Gates, who got a computer, some kind of computer at the age of 13, and spent more than 10,000 hours figuring that thing out, and we know where Bill got. So, then there was some research done by a fellow by the name of Bloom, who's also interested in how people reach very high levels of expertise. And he was trying to blow this myth out of the water that people who get a long way are talented. So they reach this level because they have talent and because they have a genetic mix of some kind. And this research that Bloom has done has shown that experts are always made and not born. So talent probably helps. Genes help. But I'm going to read you some of the research. There's many more things that get a person a long way. So the journey to superior performance is neither for the faint of heart nor the impatient. The development of genuine expertise requires struggle, sacrifice, and honest, often painful self-assessment. Is this starting to sound familiar? This is starting to sound like the spiritual path. There are no shortcuts. When people ask His Holiness about shortcuts, he becomes very sad. So Bloom says it'll take you at least a decade to achieve expertise in anything. And to do that, you have to engage in deliberate practice. So if you're going to become a musician, you can't listen to 10,000 hours worth of records. You're going to have to actually practice. And you have to practice. It has to be the kind of practice that focuses on tasks beyond your current level of competence and comfort. You need a well-informed coach who not only will guide you, but also will help you to learn to coach yourself. And there's another person that Bloom interviewed. He's a very famous violin teacher. I don't know who this is. His name is Ivan Gallman. But this Ivan fellow says that budding maestros don't engage in deliberate practice spontaneously. He says that in every instance of every artist that he's seen, their entire career was dependent on the quality of their practicing. The practicing was constantly supervised either by the teacher or an assistant to the teacher. And then, most important, these coaches and our teachers have to give us feedback, which is often painful. Real experts are extremely motivated students who seek out this kind of feedback. I'm not sure all of us here do that actively, but I think it's a goal. So that it's also good to pick an unsentimental coach who will do whatever it takes to push us to the next level. So I thought that was very interesting, that people who reach these high levels do so much, and yet we kind of squawk and complain about, what it takes to reach enlightenment. So it's an interesting thing to think about. It's hard work. It takes place over a long period of time. Now, and then I thought about another role which is very demanding, and actually there's no training for it, and it's becoming a parent. So there's people who become parents sort of by accident, and then there's people who deliberately become parents, and then there's people who become parents and they really take the role seriously. So whatever our experience is, whether it was great or not so great, we know from our own experience that our parents went through huge sacrifices. And the fact that we're alive today is because people cared about us deeply. And, if I think about what my dad did, he worked 6 days a week. We never saw him. And that made me really mad as a kid. But, he was working his butt off just to make sure that we were taken care of. And my mom was the same way. She was working a lot in the home, and she was teaching piano lessons, and they were doing everything. They put their own interests first so that we could have, a happy and safe life and have an education and all of that. So when we look at people who have reached high levels of expertise and people who have dedicated their lives like our parents for us, this is ordinary, joyous effort. It's kind of like the sad news, but it's ordinary. And the other kind of effort is the effort that bodhisattvas are capable of. And this is extraordinary joyous effort. This is spiritual joyous effort. So according to the sutra system, after the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, became a bodhisattva, it took 3 countless great eons to accumulate enough merit to attain Buddhahood. So we've heard this again and again from our teachers, this 3 countless great eons. What kind of wigs me out is, what about the period before you become a bodhisattva? And like, how long does that period take? That's where I get a little bit discouraged. We haven't heard numbers on that yet. So, anyway, bodhisattvas don't become discouraged. And it's because of their mental armor, and it's because of this armor-like perseverance. And so they have the mind state that whatever length of time it takes, that's not the point. The point is, I'm going to do this for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in doing this activity, I'm going to reach the goal. It would be fantastic to have a mind like that. Okay, I've got to go into high gear here. Okay, I think I'll be skipping around a little bit. So there's a few things tonight that really struck me in all of this material. So this next point is a really big one for me, and maybe it's going to be a big one for you. So this idea about not being discouraged. Asanga says that a bodhisattva with joyous perseverance is never discouraged. Whatever hardships or difficulties arise, they're welcomed. Everything is easy due to this special armor. So it's very easy for me to think, great, bodhisattvas can do it. I can't. Well, the Buddha has come to our rescue. And he has this teaching for us, which is so great. The Buddha says, simply admiring or having faith in this kind of perseverance is wonderful. Actually, having admiration is a kind of perseverance. So we can just look at people and say, great, I'm glad you have it. And then we can think, may I too be able to do this? And thinking like this, may I too be able to do this, creates merit. So we're already, we're making progress. We can see someone who's doing it, like His Holiness, and we can think, oh, fantastic, may I someday be able to do this. Keep thinking that. We're creating merit by doing that. So Tsongkhapa also reassures us that we can develop this kind of courage if we train our mind. Why? Because we all have the potential to become perfectly awakened Buddhas. We have this capacity to develop a bodhisattva's courage. At present, though, I'll speak for myself, my potential is still in the latent stage. It's covered up by my afflictions and negative karma. But, Tsongkhapa says, the practice of perseverance wakes up our potential. It may take our entire life to shake it open and wake it up. But if we make this firm resolve, I will do this until I die, then our activities will have force and will bear fruit. So we just have to keep this mantra. I'm going to do this until I die. I'm going to develop this perseverance. Okay, time for the next little vignette. The next person who is a complete inspiration to us, who obviously lives a joyous life filled with joyous effort. John, I need your help. So, Venerable Thupten children, and I thought it would be fun for you to hear again what Lama Zopa says about Venerable children. And he said this when he was here, I believe. Venerable children has had this dream to establish the Abbey for so many eons. for so many eons. So now it's happened. Now it's actualized. And I think it's very wonderful. At the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to thank her for all she has done for so many years. She did very hard work for this teaching, taking responsibility, teaching the Dharma at many FPMT centers in the past. So many years she's been teaching. That is not an easy thing to do, but it's the most important thing. Dharma activity, teaching Dharma, is the most important thing in the world. We can understand from looking at the world now that there is nothing more important and that the best thing to do is to practice the Dharma. And of course, somebody has to teach. So for all that, I would like to thank her very much. Normally I don't thank people. I should practice that, he says. I tell people to do it, but I myself don't do it much. I think I have to practice more awareness. It's very rare that I say thank you to people. So thank you, Venerable Children, also, for showing us what joyous perseverance looks like. Thank you, Venerable. Yeshe. So now we have to be cautious. We can't just assume that we can jump in this right this moment and behave like a bodhisattva. You can if you like, but you might encounter some discouraging thoughts again. So we have to train our mind gradually. And we do this by wishing we can do it, as we heard before. Repeatedly, we must aspire to develop the compassion that allows us to joyfully do anything that allows us to benefit sentient beings. And we have to keep thinking that, yes, I know this is going to take a long time. I'm going to encounter great hardships, and I'm going to keep going. Geshe Sopa says we need to continually imagine ourselves confidently and happily engaging in activities, no matter how difficult. Whatever it takes, I can do this. This kind of rehearsal and preparation gives our mind great power. It grows our ability to face and work through obstacles. Geshe Sopa continues and he says, if we are able to produce this thought even for a moment, we will have the courage to face every difficulty we encounter while helping other sentient beings. So this heartfelt enthusiasm creates more merit than years and years and years of practicing generosity and other virtues. And it allows us to accumulate great stores of merit. It purifies obstacles and negative karma. Okay, now there's another test question here. So this brings to mind a quote we've probably read our whole lives, and we know it well. So who said this? We are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. Aristotle. So the next kind of joyous perseverance is called the joyous effort of acting constructively or gathering virtue. And this is where we're constantly looking around, where we're looking for opportunities to help people. And it's just like, that's our whole thing in our mind. We're looking for opportunities to help. I think we can do that. And then the third kind of joyous effort is working for the benefit of others. So Venerable Children points out that this one is actually an integration of the perfections of ethics, patience, and wisdom. And she explains that we have the ethics of working for sentient beings. So being ethical while we're working for them, being patient while we're working for them, and not getting angry when they don't appreciate everything that we do for them. And then the joyous effort of working for the benefit of others, where the mind is light and lively, lighthearted, enthusiastic, and wants to do things instead of being heavy, dragging, dull, and unmotivated. Okay, it's already time for another little vignette. So I hope you can see this photo. This is a photo of Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, who's another person who's absolutely, completely inspiring and filled with joyous effort. So who else, what else could have possibly sustained Tenzin Palmo, Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, during her 12 years of retreat in a cave at 13,000 feet in the Himalayas. Fresh drinking water was a quarter of a mile away. Food was sporadically brought up from the village, and when that didn't happen, she would have to go down to the village herself to get the supplies. She ate once a day and lit her stove only once a day to cook lunch. So when she was asked about this, lighting the stove once a day, she said, "Sure, I was cold, but so what?" And at that point, the winter temperatures would plunge well below 35 degrees. And that was in the village. Up on the mountaintop, it was much colder than that. We also know that following the tradition of serious meditators, she spent her time throughout the night not sleeping in a bed, but sitting upright in her meditation box. And then there was the isolation. Occasionally, she'd see a shepherd. Sometimes a nun would come up with a friend for a day or two. And once a year, she'd go to see her teacher, Kamtrul Rinpoche, for guidance. But most of the time, she was completely alone, for months at a time. And then in the last 3 years of her retreat, she saw and spoke to no one. That is joyous perseverance. Thank you. Okay, I'm halfway through this talk. I've got 20 minutes. So I think I'm going to have to jump to things that are really critical here. The obstacles to joyous effort. Well, as we figured out, it's laziness. And the other one actually is discouragement, so we've heard about that too. And that's the mind of, I can't do it, I'm not smart enough, I didn't start learning the Dharma when I was 3 years old, my parents weren't Buddhist, I don't have Buddhist genes. We can go on and on by making excuses why I can't do it. So, and then there's this thing about being so incredibly busy. And this is actually a form of laziness. So, what are we busy doing? And you know, when I was a kid, I remember reading and hearing that in the future, technology would make it so that we'd have these vast amounts of leisure. We'd have all the time in the world to do, I'm not sure what. But when I was a kid, I think I was going to climb mountains, I think, or maybe just walk on the beach. I don't know. But we see that it's quite the opposite. Technology has made us busier. We've got gadgets to keep us engaged. When you're at a stoplight, just look around and see what people are doing in their cars. It's totally amazing. When we go into Spokane to lead meditation class, this is one thing I do at stoplights. I look around and I see what people are doing. So it's a number of things. They're on their phone, they're eating, they're drinking coffee or something. One time I saw a person practicing the guitar. Some people are smoking. Some people are giving their kids heck in the back seat. There's this whole variety of things, and people are so busy. So, sometimes I bet they're listening to the Dharma. I hope. So, we actually don't see this as a form of laziness, of course. We're out there. But we need to know the dangers of this kind of laziness and what to do about it. So we're going to figure out right now how we're going to deal with this. And laziness actually has these two divisions, and the first is procrastination. So this is where we understand the value of the goal. We've learned about the path. We understand we can accomplish it. And wow, this is incredible. Yes, let's get enlightened. I like that idea. I really want to get out of samsara. Fantastic. But, you know what? I am going to go and look at the New York Times first before I get to the cushion. And I'll do it later. So, the second form of laziness is not intentionally postponing something like practice, but we're simply so consumed in the world with gathering wealth, building our reputation, exercising, praise, fame, feeding our sense pleasures nonstop, that we actually don't even know that there's something else to do with our life. So we chase after these things full tilt, And also, obviously, we don't know that there's something beyond this life. And so that kind of engagement makes perfect sense. And, we've all lived lives like this before we met the Dharma. And so it would be very inappropriate to criticize others when we see this going on, now that we know the Dharma. And I remember, before I met the Dharma, I was convinced that making artistic statements was going to help the world. And then one night I went to see a taiko drum concert, and I knew immediately I wanted to be a taiko drummer. And I'm embarrassed to say that for the next 10 years, I practiced hard enough and long enough that I became a taiko drummer. And so it might have made some people happy. We had sellout crowds in Alberta. We were locally famous. People loved it. But it didn't do anything for my progress on the path. And I think I'm probably a bit hard of hearing as a result. So, the laziness of procrastination is well described by Venerable Children as having the mañana mentality. So, I'll do it later. I'll do it when I'm old. I'll do it in a few years when I've got my career in shape and I've become well known in my field, and I'll have enough money, and then I'll have more time later. Or we think I'll do it next week because I've got a really busy schedule this week and I'm meeting my friend on Friday night. And my friends are coming over on Saturday night, and you know the story. You know the script. The problem with that is that we can keep putting it off forever. And then this third kind of laziness is to disparage ourselves. We don't want to practice because we don't think we have enough wisdom. We just don't think we have the capacity. I've got ADHD, I can't focus on what I'm reading, so on. So Shantideva explains that each of these hindrances is an extremely serious hindrance to a bodhisattva's practice. So we need to recognize what to do, or we need to recognize these hindrances when they arise and apply an antidote. So there's 3 antidotes to this laziness of procrastination. So obviously the first one is when we catch ourselves thinking, I'll get to the cushion in a serious way, I'll go on retreat next year or next month. We've got to do the meditations on death and impermanence, because how do we know that when we're old, if we get to be old, that we're going to practice first of all? Or how do we know we're going to be alive next year to go on retreat at Sravasti Abbey? So we've got to really spend time cultivating this awareness that the time of death is unknown and it can come at any time, and we've got to practice now. Then there's another kind of thinking that's very dangerous, and people realize that, okay, so if I don't get to the cushion right now, well, I may be reborn in a lower rebirth, probably an animal, but it's okay. I might end up at the Abbey, and then I'm around Tupten children, Venerable Tupten children all the time, and all of these monastics will be kissing me and holding me, and I'll hear teachings all the time. And I actually have a friend who said that he would like to be like his cat because the cat is so well loved, and I say to him, please don't wish for that. And Geshe Sopa reminds us that because animals tend to negativity, it's just their nature, their next rebirth is probably going to be even worse unless they're here at the Abbey. And it's like a rock tumbling down the side of a ravine from a high mountain peak. It is most difficult to stop and bring back up. And that warning is very sobering, like a rock tumbling down a mountain. So, the fact that we think that we could be reborn as a human very soon is kind of a loony idea. It could be eons away. And then the third antidote to laziness is to meditate on how rare and precious a human rebirth is, and how difficult it is to attain. Okay, I'm just looking at the time. I think I'll skip down to this. So if we've not yet heard any Buddhist teachings, and we're not aware of future rebirths, We'll do whatever we do, obviously, to obtain happiness. From a religious point of view, playing around and joking and laughing and filling our time with activities that appeal to our senses are great, huge distractions. They prevent us from doing meaningful activities, and they're roadblocks to pursuing enlightenment for sure. So, how to work with this? Well, the more we study and concentrate and analyze the distractions and their opposites, the stronger our wisdom will be. And gradually the wisdom that comes from analytical meditation will dominate our mind. Our interest in activities that bring only temporal happiness will decline, and our practice will become stronger. Now, this obstacle of self-contempt. There's 3 ways to counter this, which is good, because this one comes up a lot in very insidious ways, at least in my experience. And the first countermeasure is to stop our discouragement about the goal. Geshe Sopa says it's very dangerous to have a negative attitude about oneself if we've taken the Bodhisattva vow. It is losing bodhicitta to think you cannot attain the goal. So we need to block this kind of thought as soon as it arises. So the moment we say, forget it, I can't do it, we have to say, okay, that thinking stops. Then, Shantideva has come up with a remedy for this kind of thinking. And there's actually 10 points to this remedy, and it's fantastic. So, his first point is, look at the Buddha. He has perfected all his good qualities and eliminated all the faults. The second point, whatever he says is true. He wouldn't lie to us. And Venerable keeps telling us, would the Buddha lie? So the Buddha is not telling us a lie. We can accomplish the path. The Buddha teaches that every sentient being has the potential to attain Buddhahood. The Buddha has had many lives in the past. They were human, animal, insect, and so on. All those who have become Buddhas have started out just like us. They were not Buddhas from the beginning. We've obtained a precious human rebirth. We've encountered the teachings, and now we need to practice for a very long time. We must do this. His 6th point is that slowly the afflictions will decrease and our good qualities will increase. The 8th point is that all living creatures have the same potential. All will attain awakening if they meet with the proper method and they have enough courage and work very hard. The 9th point is ask yourself, since even animals can attain Buddhahood, why can't I? And the 10th point is, unlike animals or unfortunate beings, we have this incredible opportunity to accomplish wonderful things. With this human life, we're equipped to know the benefits and the disadvantages of our actions. We can look at our present situation and make conclusions about what we've done in the past, and we can infer from our present actions what will happen in the future. With this kind of mental capacity, of course, we can attain awakening if we maintain joyous effort and courage. So then something else that's very interesting pops up in all of this material. And Geshe Sopa points out that there is something called true discouragement. And this actually doesn't arise until we recognize the nature of enlightenment and how difficult it is to attain. So guess what? When we really truly understand the path, we're going to get profoundly discouraged. And apparently this is necessary. And until we reach this point, we're actually going to think that the path is, pretty easy. Yeah, I can get there with not a lot of effort. I didn't even need to do 10,000 hours. I just need to get on the cushion every now and then, maybe once a day. And I'll listen to Venerable Children's teachings. So our understanding of the path is vague. And Geshe Sopa says when our understanding is vague, We don't know what it takes, and so we won't do it. So fortunately, we have Venerable Children teaching us the paths and grounds, and we're actually learning what's involved in getting enlightened. Okay, so the next vignette. So obviously I can't show you a picture of everyone who has joyous effort on the planet, but you can make your own lists and write your own vignettes for people who inspire you. So this is a picture of Geshe Sopa, obviously. And apparently his abilities were apparent from a very early age. He was selected as one of the scholars to test His Holiness the Dalai Lama at his final exams, even before Geshe Sopa had completed his own exams. Then His Holiness asked Geshe Sopa to go to the US. And so, in not a very long time, Geshe Sopa became a tenured professor at the University of Wisconsin, and he was there for more than 30 years. So he inspired so many people. Currently, I think there are 3 volumes of the Lamrim Chenmo, his commentary, and there's at least 2 more volumes on the way. So he's an incredible being, and we're so fortunate that Geshe Sopa had the chance to come and teach here at the Abbey 2 years ago. So may he have a very long life and continue to inspire us with his teachings. So, Geshe Sopa says, once we truly understand what's entailed in attaining awakening, we will be discouraged. And then you apply the antidotes. So, there's a next little bright light coming up here for me. And this is really, I think, very significant about how to deal with this discouragement about how long it takes and still feel joyful about this length of time. And here's what Geshe Sopa has to say about this. The hardship involved in the practice to attain awakening is nothing in comparison to the sufferings in cyclic existence. That's pretty big. The difficulties that bodhisattvas endure are short-term, and bodhisattvas understand that the difficulties are helping them to attain the great goal of awakening for themselves and others. Therefore, the challenges are not a burden. Shantideva says, for many countless eons, innumerable times I've been cut, stabbed, burned, and flayed, but I've not attained enlightenment. There is a limit to the suffering. For me to attain awakening, it is like the pain of an operation to remove a deep and harmful disease. So what this quote points to is that the difficulties that we'll endure to attain awakening can be measured. It has a limit. So this will go on for a certain period of time. However, samsaric suffering is immeasurable. It can go on endlessly. So there's our choice. We can be in this profound state of misery and suffering endlessly to infinity. Or we can shorten it up. Okay, so the good news is, yes, it's going to be a long time. And as Venerable Children says, well, what else are we going to do anyway? So do we want to sort of swim around in this sea of suffering forever and ever and ever? Or do we want to get on this surfboard and, surf to our goal, which is going to take quite some time, but there is a limit to it. And that, I think, is the most inspiring piece of advice. Now, let's see. Okay, so the third countermeasure to combating the discouragement that wherever you are is the place to practice. So we might get over the fact that, okay, I can do it. Okay, it's going to take a long time, but I'll do it. And then we think, well, how can I do it here? This is samsara. There's people following me around all day who are just trying to bug me. I can't practice here. It's too noisy. The person behind me is clicking her beads. We get all these minds going. I can't practice here. No, it's not possible. So the good news about that is bodhisattvas are ornamented with joy. They don't care how noisy it is. They don't care if people are following them around trying to bug them. In fact, this is just fuel to their fire. Their words would be, bring it on. You know, I want this kind of challenge because I'm going to get enlightened for my own sake and for everyone else's sake as well. Tsongkhapa reminds us of a Sangha's advice, which is this. One is that we should not get discouraged about the extensive training of bodhisattvas. And second, and this is another thing to think about, we should never be satisfied with developing a few good qualities. So, this idea about being satisfied with developing a few good qualities, the Sangha says we must be eager to learn more and more and to develop more and more and push ourselves to master every perfection until we're at the point of Buddhahood. So this seduction of getting a little ways on the path and then feeling comfortable, I guess, is a huge obstacle. When describing what problems came up for her in her 12-year retreat, Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo said that she had to work with the laziness of not settling for second or third. And she says that that's what her struggle was. She would sort of get into this mode of thinking, that's good enough, and then realizing that that was just second or third best. Thomas Merton said the biggest human temptation is to settle for too little. That's a very sobering comment as well. Okay, I have a few minutes to do these 4 powers, so I'm going to go for it. These are great. I love these word powers. So these are powers we can develop. So the first power to develop joyous effort is the power of aspiration. So this is just having the interest in spiritual practice and cultivating it over and over again. Without interest, we're not going to do anything. So this is the power of aspiration. And the more we want to do something, the more we're going to do it. The second power is the power of steadfastness. And this is taking a serious look at what we can currently do. What are our abilities? Can we accomplish a certain task? Do we have the conditions and the circumstances? And if we don't, we shouldn't do it. Because apparently, if we continually start something and stop it, even in spiritual practice, we'll set up this habit of starting and stopping. And that becomes a huge obstacle. The third power is developing the power of joy. And this works in 2 ways. We're delighted to begin an activity, and through doing it, we experience so much happiness that we want to keep doing it. And Shantideva says this is like a child's enthusiasm for play. The more they do it, the more they want to do it, and they don't want to give it up. A bodhisattva's perseverance is similar. Their wish for the fruit of the path makes their desire to practice the path unquenchable. And the fourth power, this is going to be a big hit here, is the power of relinquishment. And so what this refers to is we have to really pace ourselves. And when we feel like we're getting too stretched or too tight or too tired, guess what? The teachings say we should take a rest. So we have to watch out for this in retreat especially. I remember in the Vajrasattva retreat, this idea of 111,000 recitations of the mantra drove me nuts in the first month. And I got so stressed out that I think I got a bit of lung. I was so freaked out trying to push every day to get those mantras in because I had this mathematical equation. And I don't know how much purifying I was doing at that point because I was so worried about was I going to get those numbers in. And I got really tight and I didn't really rest. And so they say, you know, if you push yourself too hard in the spiritual path, well, we know in the short term we'll get something like lung, which we can get over. But the scary thing is that we can actually get so tight, we can think, okay, forget it. This is too hard. Buddhism is not for me, I'm done. And that is very, very dangerous. So being in a state of mental and physical exhaustion renders us unable to do anything worldly or spiritual that's good. And if we push while doing spiritual practice, we may develop this aversion. So we've got to rest and take care of our body and mind, and then resume when we're ready to go. So I think I will end tonight with this quote. It's from a sutra called The Questions of Subahu. If you joyously persevere to the extent that you are able, then you will quickly complete the perfection of joyous perseverance in future lives without suffering and with little difficulty. So, John?
There's a question?
From you?
No? Someone would you like to hear it?
Sure.
So the question is, if there's someone who's close to you and they're a difficult person that's affecting one's practice, is it part of the practice to disassociate with the person and move on in your practice, or is it to continue with your association with that person? And then they say that if they disassociate, then there's a criticism that you're abandoning your commitment to that person. However, if they associate with the person, then they're guilty of attachment to the idea of being such a great bodhisattva.
Well, I think I'm going to ask my friends in the audience here for help with this one. I think it depends on our capacity again. And I think if continuing the association makes the mind tight and we're continually encountering perhaps more negativity in our own mind, maybe stepping back for a little bit is beneficial. I need some help here. Any ideas?
There's not enough, it's quite a vague question because we don't know what the relationship is, we don't know what the difficulty is, we don't know what level of practice the person's at. So it's kind of a hard question to answer. My first instinct was for them to check the state of their mind and what is the difficulty arising as. First, to check their own motivation and their own state of mind rather than the difficulty of another, is seeing what is the state of my mind in relationship to this person first. So I think that's the check-in first.
Was that audible, John? What Venpa Semke said?
I couldn't tell.
I think we'll have to think on this one. It's a complicated question, so we'll get back to you. So thank you very much. We'll have Venerable Tarpa gracing us with her presence next week on the perfections of concentration and wisdom. And 2 weeks from tonight will be Venerable Thupten Chodron, unless she gets enlightened, I guess. But I think she's promised to come back, right? Okay, thank you.
Due to
This merit may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born of no decline but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until samsara ends. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread into 10 directions. May the light of love song's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase.
May the deeds
Of explaining and practicing the Dharma done by groups supporting the teachings and their upholders, who spread the view of dependent arising and non-violent actions in the 10 directions, and especially at Sravasti Abbey